Hi, Quinbus here, a member of the Freeplane user community. The purpose of this video is to produce just a small demonstration that will highlight three of the common techniques that are available for bringing images into Freeplane maps. Um, Freeplane is an amazing platform for organizing thoughts and ideas. Images are just another way to do that. There are a number of reasons why you might want to use images in your mind map. One that comes to mind for me first is meeting capture. I use Freeplane extensively for taking notes in meeting settings. There's just nothing else I've tried that comes even close. And images are important because it allows you to capture group photographs, people who were in the room, label them for future reference, as well as capturing any written materials that were produced in the room on chart paper or whiteboards. You also may use images for the creation of what I would call customized, let's call them icons or thumbnails, that can make a visual node in your mind map. In other words, instead of words, you have a picture that stands for something that will be appended in terms of information to that. You use them at first level, for example, and have a series of pictures as opposed to words that speak to you in a different way than words would. I also use them for screen captures out on the web, particularly information that I've snipped out of web pages. Rather than capturing a URL to the web page itself, which is a technique that I use quite a bit, sometimes you may just want to capture a quote, or there is just a piece of information embedded in a web page that you want for your own use. And I will use a freeware piece of software to capture a region of the screen and save it as an image file out on my hard drive, and then that image is incorporated in my map. So it makes a wonderful way to capture important research or reference materials for later use. There are many other reasons why you might want to use images, but I think these three will suffice. For this presentation, as I said, I'll be using Freeplane 1.2.20, which is available for free at sourceforge.net. Now, each of the examples I'll be demonstrating today, I'm going to be using the same image file. It's a simple digital photograph that I took at a conference about a year ago. Any image file will work, but this is just what I'll be using here. And to keep continuity, I'll be showing you the same image file in the different techniques and how they're used. Okay, the first alternative we'll look at is found under the menu item Edit, Node Extensions, Add Image. I've gone ahead and brought in an image for you here. Again, it's the headshot I took at a conference, and you can see if I get it big enough that here are the folks that were at the meeting, and I've actually incorporated some text in the graphic itself that shows who was who. I've already demonstrated to you the biggest and most powerful capability of this particular feature, and that's its dynamic scalability. By clicking on the lower right bottom corner, you see how the cursor changes to a little double-headed arrow. When I click, hold, and pull, I'm actually going to change the way the image appears in the mind map. Obviously, the file is whatever it is. If it was small to start with and grainy, it's going to be larger and grainier. So I'm not doing anything to improve the visual impact of the image, but I'm changing its size as it's portrayed within Freeplane. This is a very powerful feature. It allows you to have a small image that you can expand for purpose of inspection at some point in the future. There is I guess with every advantage comes a set of disadvantages, and one of them that might be a disadvantage to this approach for some users is the fact that as the image gets smaller, it becomes centered underneath the node under which it's attached, as you see here, which results in a visual margin or indent here. That indent changes as the image size changes, up to the point that the image is roughly the same size as the node, in which case then everything is symmetrical. But as the image gets bigger, you see the node begins to expand to accommodate the larger image. even though in my properties panel I have established a node width of 250 pixels, I can make this node now visually is going to end up being as big as I want to make it, but that makes the node bigger relative to its siblings. So this changes the visual appeal of the map. It changes the way the map looks on a dynamic basis. And so if you had many of these images in your map, each with different sized basic files, you're going to have sort of a ragged edge vertically and horizontally. Some of the nodes will be fatter because of their images, some will be skinnier. So it's going to be a visually jumbled depending on, again, what you're trying to do and what you're working with. So that could, in fact, be one of the disadvantages for some people. But for me, the biggest disadvantage is there is no way to hide the image. It always appears below the node, and it always is going to give the node, if you want to think of it, vertical height, because there's an image attached to it. So relative to its siblings, any node with an image is going to look different, and it stays that way. I mean, you can change, the size of the image if you want to, but you still have this indent with this piece of visual business out underneath the node that's going to attract your eye in a different way from other siblings in a map. To me, that is an issue. I sometimes would not want the image to become something the eye is attracted to, and I would like to be able to hide it, but there is no way to do that with this feature. Fortunately, there is another feature that will allow you to do that, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, the next option we'll talk about, option 2, is reached by the Freeplane Edit menu, Edit Node Core, Image by Link or Choice. This feature is a little bit different and gives you certain advantages and disadvantages that you don't have with either of the other two. It is a perfect way to make visual thumbnails within your map, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. The main thing you need to remember about this option is that images that are brought in to nodes are not scalable from within Freeplane. Well, anything's possible if you know how to edit HTML and you're familiar with HTML coding. You could make the thing a different size by modifying the HTML coding associated with this image. But for most of us, it's not easy to do, and it's certainly not a quick thing. So for practical purposes, it's not scalable from within Freeplane. The only way you can affect the size of an image would be by modifying the file itself out on the whatever resource, hard drive, network, whatever, changing its size physically by means of an image editor viewer, and then when you bring that into Freeplane, it will appear as a smaller file because you've made it smaller physically. The reason this works this way is that the image you're seeing in Freeplane under this option is actually the result of an HTML link into the external image file, and it exists in the node core container. Again, if you know how to edit HTML within Freeplane, you could open up that container and you'll see the reference embedded there in HTML coding. Let me give you an example of how it works before we go on. I'm going to go out here and select Edit Node Core, Image by Choice or Link, and I'm going to select this particular file and bring it in. This was taken with a digital camera at a meeting in Manila or Bangkok a year ago. And you see what's happened because it came in this way. That's the size it is out on my file. So that's the way you see it in Freeplane. It isn't like the other option that I can grab the little corner down here and rescale it. What you see basically is what you get. And it has crowded out my map. If you see the other nodes are smaller, and this thing is gargantuan by comparison, and it just completely overpowers the map. So using this file in this way I would find unacceptable because it's more information than I want to look at most of the time and it's not, it's overpowered everything else. So let me undo this, and let's go get a different file. This time I've taken the same file, but I edited it using my native image editing program that exists on my computer, and I actually fourthed its size. I made it 1/4 the size it was before. Now I'll go use the same capability, edit node core image by choice or link, and I'll pull in this small version of the same file. Now you see it sits out here as a node on its own, and what's effectively happened is that the node has become the image. There's no text involved, it just sits there. These kinds of things are very useful, as I'll say down here, as a high quality visual label for branches within your map. Following the idea of Tony Buzan, making your map more visual helps you to remember better because it's using a different part of your brain. This technique is one of the best ways I've found to do that. So if you're wanting to make a map, let's say, of you're putting together a chemistry map, as someone recently did on a Freeplane forum, and you wanted to put down a series of facts by certain elements, perhaps you could create an image file of that element's atomic structure and use that as the high-level node under which all the other information would be stored. Or perhaps you're creating a dossier of staff members. Instead of just putting their names as a text in each of the high-level nodes, what if you took a picture of each one, and then under those, the children underneath that node for each employee or staff member would provide information about that person, but the visual image at the high level would be, this is information about Susie or Bob. Those things are very helpful in remembering information that exists in a flat file like this. So in this case, I've made the image very much smaller. It now fits better within the map as I've constructed it. What you see is what you get, and the reason that is so is because this file on my hard drive is 1/4 the size of it as it was when I started. So I had to do some extra work. Of course, I've lost some detail here. There's no way to make that bigger now. There's no way to look at it in closer detail. I've made it this small, and now it's kind of hard to see some of those faces. So for an application involving a group picture, it loses some effectiveness unless I want to have the big picture out there all the time. You can add text to this, but to do this you'll need to edit the node core in its discrete HTML editor. I just opened this file. If you see here, this is the way it looks. I can go to I can actually increase the space here. This is a test. I might decide I want to center it, so I could actually effectively give this picture a label. And now you see, I have added text to the node core. But to do that by just double clicking the first time, your picture is up here in this corner, and there really isn't any way to add text before the picture. You could add it afterwards, but you're going to have problems with spacing. So the only reason I mention this is to say it's clunky to add node core text. It can be done. You'll need to practice with it a little bit, and you'll need to actually get into the HTML, simply HTML editor to make that happen. So it's not just using the normal techniques you would use. Let's see. To remove images brought in by means of this option, I haven't found any menu items that let you do that. The only way I've found to do it would be to actually open the editor, highlight the image itself, and then backspace. And then when you, of course, say OK, it's gone. So it's a little bit different than the others in that you can't just delete it from a menu. You're going to have to go in there and actually edit the layout view of simply HTML editor. Okay, that concludes option 2. Now let's move to option 3. Option 3 is actually my favorite. It combines the best elements of the other two And I find it to be very effective for the kinds of maps I like to build. That's not to say that the other two options don't have their uses. It's just that I find I myself go back to option 3 more often than the others. Option 3 is not native to Freeplane. It is really an add-on script that was developed about a year ago by one of the premier coders in Freeplane programming team, Volker Borchers, and user Rickenbach collaborated together to create this little simple script that allows you to bring in an image file into a node and designate where you want it to go. So it can either go into node core text or it can go into node detail containers. You get a choice. And because it can go into the node detail container, because you can tell the program you want it to go there, that means node details can be toggled on and off. So you can hide an image from the bigger map. And I'll show you how that works in just a minute. What's made it even better is that the script has now been deployed as a quick and easy add-on to Freeplane. Add-ons are prepackaged scripts and commands that, when installed on your system, basically makes this foolproof. It takes a script and installs it automatically and even assigns it a unique keyboard combination so that it can be called just by Control-Shift-I. Brings this little dialog box up that we'll use in just a minute. The images that come in using this technique are scalable, but only on the initial setup. And I'll show you what that means as in a demonstration. But in the first example, you can use the little handle to dynamically resize images on the fly. In this case, you can bring the image in, but and tell the program what size you want it to be, and it will proportionally shrink it or enlarge it, and then capture that in HTML code and associate it with the node in which you've called this script for. So it is scalable, but not dynamically, if that makes sense. As I said before, you're able to designate a container. You want it to go in node core or node details, you get to pick. It has this wonderful capability to quickly store screen clippings from the web. So you can take images that are in your clipboard and store them in a Freeplane as a Freeplane image. And in the process, this little script asks you for a file name so that you can capture that image and put it someplace on your hard drive. This is a wonderful way for capturing information on the fly on the web. You can use a screen clipping tool, capture what you want by means of a lasso, and then copy it to your clipboard. You go back to the program and then say, I want to use that as an image, and immediately the little program, the little script will ask you, what do you want to call this? So it's eliminated what would have been 2 steps and made it into 1. It's very, very effective for a web clipping tool. And we'll talk more about the node covering the image in a second. Let me use this as an example. I'm going to go Control-Shift-I because I've installed this software, this add-on onto my computer, and you see a dialog box pops up. I could type in the URL if I chose, but I'll go out and fetch it. Comes up to the default directory that your program's running in, and I look for the image. Let's just take this large one and say open. Then I get to say, do I want to put a link target in here? This is very powerful. You can either have a legend, which would be the typical blue script at the bottom underneath your image, that when you clicked on it would go back to the image, opening it in its native image viewer on your computer. Or you could have it, if you don't select as a legend, then you basically have made the picture itself the link identifier. This is the one I prefer. So by simply clicking on the picture, you will automatically open the file on your hard drive. If you don't put a link at all, nothing happens, but image path is basically the image where it's on your hard drive, so that when you click there, it'll take you to that place using your native program. If you want to put your own link in other words, you want this picture to do something else, you could create that right here in this space. you can proportionally size the image at this point. It comes in at 1.0 relative to whatever it is on the whatever it is and whatever size. You remember in our earlier example on option 2, I'm bringing in this as a fairly large program, so I don't want it to be quite that big, but because I can hide it, I might choose to. Now I'm not forced to make a decision, but let's just go ahead and make it just a little bit smaller. Okay, so this is the full-size image still out there, but it's now being shrunk down by, let's say, about a half. And you saw what happened to it, its relative height and width, and that can serve as a judge to let you know about how big the picture is going to be. And then you get to say, and this is the part I love, do you want it to come into node text or into node details? The default is node details, and you'll see why when I say OK. Okay, now you see I have the picture has been brought in. When I highlight over it, you see the blue line around it, which means it's a link. It's in node details, so I can hide it. Isn't that cool? So I can actually make the image appear and disappear as I wish. And this is significant because in each of the other examples, you know that the node expands to cover the space required by the image. And when it's in node detail, that's true as well. And so this node is now bigger than everything else on the page, but it's not necessarily that big when I close the detail. It shrinks back to its default size for the node. So it keeps all the nodes in your presentation all the same size. There's no visual clutter, but the information is available when you want it. Now here's an example of what I love. I say I want to look at this picture in better detail. The faces are a little bit fuzzy at this sizing. By clicking on the link, which I just did, now it's opened in my native image viewer on my computer, which I use Irfan View, IRFANVIEW on a Windows environment. And you see now I've brought that picture in outside of Freeplane in its own viewer, and I have all kinds of tools here that I can use to select, crop, whatever I want to do. I have the capacity to do that's the program lets me have, Irfan View lets me have. So I don't need to make the hard choice about does it need to be small or large. I don't have to do any resizing out there before I bring it in like I did with option 2. And if I choose, which I often do, I don't have to have it demonstrate. It's not even visible until I want it to be. It's a beautiful application. Let me give you an example. Here's a large footprint, the one I just showed you before. It's now, it's fairly large. I haven't resized that at all, but it's in node core, node text, so node details, so I can shrink it. Here's an example, another way I've used it. I actually brought it into node details, and I stuck a table in there that gives me information about the picture, but the picture is still a link. When I click on it, it opens in its native viewer. So I get all the capacity I want, the ability to label and add, use the picture as a part of a larger node detail text, but when I don't want to see it, it's gone. And that's the part I love about this option. And I think that's the one that sells it for me, is gives me the ability to structure my maps so that they all look relatively the same and they're all nice and neat without large blobs of visual distraction out there. Your mileage will certainly vary. I encourage you to play with each of these 3 options and figure out which one works best for you. If you have any questions about any of these, I'm by no means an expert, but I do like to use these 3 capabilities. I'm out there on the user forum for Freeplane, so feel free to drop me a line and we can talk. Good luck and enjoy the capabilities that you get from Freeplane.